Capitalism versus communism, which is better? What if I told you that the two systems we've been taught are complete opposites, are not so different? Would you believe that capitalism and communism might actually be mirror images of each other? Welcome back to Sometimes and Forever with me, Denny Downing. Today I want to explore some key differences between capitalism and communism, not just in the theory we have been taught in textbooks, but in the reality of these two systems and how they've shaped real lives, our lives. After we examine the differences, we're going to turn the lens around a little and look at the similarities between these two. Our aim is to find out if any of the two is inherently better. This discussion today might very well change how you see power, money, and personal freedom. In our world today, there are only a handful of countries that identify as communists. These are China, Cuba, Laos, Vietnam, and North Korea. But this debate about these two ideologies still matters because it shapes the ideological struggle that still exists in geopolitics and trade. It affects the arguments put forward for the ever-increasing wealth gap, and also it tries to posit ideas on how to fix problems in countries right around the world. In short, even though capitalism seems to be winning, the struggle between capitalism and communism is still shaping our lives. So let's start with the theory of these ideologies. This is not an in-depth discussion of these theories. It really is an overview of some of the differences between these two. Okay, so let's start with difference number 1, ownership. Who controls wealth? At its core, capitalism, which is shaped by thinkers like the economist Adam Smith, is built on the principles of liberty and private ownership. In his work entitled An Enquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, Smith wrote, "Every man, as long as he does not violate the laws of justice, is left perfectly free to pursue his own interest, his own way, and to bring both his industry and capital into competition with those of any other man." Smith never actually used the word capitalism, but his theory lays the groundwork for the system that now exists. Smith believed that people are free, and as a free person, you own your labor, you own your business, and you get to pursue what you are interested in. This pursuit, he believed, will result in better livelihoods being created, better competition in the free markets, and of course, better economies. The government, in his theory, is supposed to play the role of protector of private property and builder of public infrastructure, and the government isn't supposed to do much more than that. Communism, on the other hand, is rooted in the ideas of Karl Marx, and it rejects what Smith says. Communism says that capitalist owners, the bourgeoisie, exploit the workers, the proletariat, for profit. The slogan, "Workers of the World Unite," was a rallying cry of communists who wanted to unite ordinary people against capitalism and, of course, encourage solidarity. In the theory of communism, everything is owned collectively. There are no billionaires, no extreme inequality, no extreme wealth gaps, just shared resources for the common good. This is a very nice sounding theory, but it doesn't answer the question, if everyone owns something in common, who will actually control it? Okay, let's move on to the difference number 2, motivation. Why do people work? Capitalism runs on incentive. So the system is supposed to work like this. You work hard, you earn money, and you will in turn rise economically. So it follows that the harder you work, the more you earn, and the more you earn, the more likely it is that you will rise to the top. Do you find this to be true? Are you rising higher and higher in life the more you work? Most people would disagree. To be clear, there are many people who are climbing the social ladder. They are, in fact, earning more money and getting recognized in some quarters in a capitalist structure. So there is economic growth and prosperity for some people. But these same people will tell you that they're not happier. They're not happier than they were before, and they don't feel freer. As a matter of fact, they may be feeling enslaved to their jobs. On the other hand, there are those who never made it. These people often end up feeling despondent. They begin to believe they are not successful because they are not working hard enough. And if they just work a little harder, they will make it. But this way lies frustration and burnout. What about communism? What does communism say about work? This system of thought aims for equality of outcome. The idea is everyone contributes based on their ability and are in turn given something from the state based on their need. So everyone earns no matter what they do or don't do. But critics argue this can weaken motivation, because if everyone gets despite working hard or not, then what will separate those who are excellent from those who are mediocre? Let's turn our attention to the role of government as seen through the eyes of capitalism and communism. In capitalist systems like the United States, the ideal is limited government intervention. This means that the markets decide on prices, businesses are supposed to compete vigorously for profits, and consumers are free to choose what they want. In communist systems, historically associated with the Soviet Union, the government played a central role in everything. It was the government that controlled industries, it planned the economy, it decided on distribution, or we can say the government decided who gets what. In this system, the state becomes everything. Okay, so let's now look at the difference number 4. The foundation of both of these systems, freedom versus equality. Capitalism prioritizes individual freedoms. Remember, Adam Smith said, everyone is free. So you can start a business, you can invest your money, you're free to build wealth however you want, as long as it is legal. Of course, you can also lose wealth as well. Communism, on the other hand, prioritizes equality. The goal is to eliminate class struggles and to create a society where no one is drastically richer or poorer than anyone else. And here's where I believe the greatest tension exists between capitalism and communism, because one wants to maximize freedom and the other equality. They don't seem to agree that freedom and equality can exist at the same time. And that takes us to the final difference between the two, wealth distribution. In capitalism, inequality is expected, maybe even accepted. Some people rise, some people fall. In communism, inequality is the problem to be solved. Wealth is distributed to create balance, so no one should be in need. In practice, though, that redistribution often comes with control, and sometimes even coercion, because it's a human being who has to do the distribution. So now we're going to move the conversation away from theory and we're going to look at it in practice. Because these theories didn't stay on paper, they exist in people's everyday lives. Here's where I believe we're going to see that they are really not that different after all. The United States has become the global symbol of capitalism with its innovations, entrepreneurship, and wealth creation. And there is no doubt that the United States is a great nation, and it has done some wonderful things. But it's quickly becoming the poster child for rising inequality. Corporate powers rule the roost, and a widening gap between rich and poor is very obvious. Meanwhile, if we take a look at Russia, the former foremost communist country, this country shifted away from communism. After the fall of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, we saw this kind of change, and Russia became what is now called a market-based economy. So they're technically no longer communist. The interesting thing, though, is when the Iron Curtain fell in 1991, what the world beheld wasn't a country of pure equals living behind the wall. a country where everyone lived well and received equal wealth from the government. What we saw instead was an oligarchy, a small group of powerful individuals controlling massive wealth. And sadly, we also beheld horror stories of repression, censorship, and brutal executions. So now we have to ask, did one system win, or did both evolve into something else entirely? What do you think? Did the systems change over time, or were they always this way but we just didn't see it? Share your thoughts with me in the comments below. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, because despite their differences, capitalism and communism share some deep similarities. Let's look at the matter of power. In both situations, power is concentrated at the top. In theory, communism eliminates elites. In reality, it often creates political elites. Remember we talked about that wealth distribution? It's the political leaders who do the distribution. What do you think happens when a few controls what others are supposed to get? They can weaponize it against those they don't like, and they can hoard it for themselves without fear of being held accountable. But don't think capitalism is different, because in capitalism, wealth is concentrated in big corporations and with billionaires. And if they want to, they can lock you out of opportunities. Capitalism also gives people the ability to hope and dream that they too can make it if they just go to school, get good grades, and get a good job. Many struggle all their lives trying to achieve that dream without realizing that when those in charge keep you dreaming and hoping, that's how they stay rich. They sell you things you don't need and tell you it will make you better and more like us. And you keep spending money, going into debt, hoping you will be successful too. What only a few people will tell you is that a simple life is good enough. Communism and capitalism are different paths, but they take you to the same destination, with power sitting at the top. Another similarity is that in both systems, the individual can get lost. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that in capitalism, you can become invisible if you lack money. In communism, you can become invisible if you lack political importance. Either way, both systems forget the individual human being. How do these systems maintain the status quo? How do they ensure that things remain the same? Well, they both use control. Capitalism controls us through markets they create, the debts we owe for things we really can't afford, and also the limited opportunities given to some and withheld from others. Communism controls us through the state, the plans and regulations they implement. These lock out or include people. No matter how it is done, both systems shape our behavior. They tell us what we can do, what we earn, and how we can live. Both capitalism and communism sound powerful in theory. One promises freedom and endless opportunities, the other equality and fairness. In other words, they both tell a story. Capitalism tells you if you work hard, you can succeed. Communism tells you we're in this together. They're both just stories, narratives that are used to inspire or control, depending on how you look at it. So what's the truth? Which is better? Which can help solve the world's problems? For me, it comes down to this. When you strip away all the fluff and the hype, they're basically the same. The lives of many people at the bottom are controlled by the few at the top. None of these systems is better. It's a matter of power changing its name, but never its nature. Whether you're living in a capitalist country or in a country that holds to communist ideals, the struggle between freedom, equality, and power still exists, and it's playing out every single day. Maybe the most important thing we can do is not to blindly choose a side, but to understand the system we're living in, the role we play, and then try to figure out for ourselves how we can make our own lives better. This has been Sometimes and Forever. Thanks for watching.